The year was 1995, June 25th that is. Core States Arena, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We had the WWE present another edition of The King of the Ring, in which we'd have an attendance of 12,000 people and a pay-per-view buy rate of 150,000 people worldwide, live on that evening. Commentaries for the evening was Vince McMahon, along with Michael P.S. Hayes in his Doc Hendricks persona. 8 superstars, including The Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, and Yokozuna, would compete for the right to be in the annual King of the Ring tournament. Diesel and Bam Bam Bigelow would face off in a team to take on the likes of Tatanka and Psycho Sid, following up from In Your House, the original first premiere In Your House pay-per-view. In the main event, Bret Hart would take on Jerry the King Lawler in the infamous Kiss My Foot match, in which Jerry Lawler would train by walking through horse stables to prepare his feet for Bret Hart for the kissing of the feet. All that and much more here on Tap Out Talk. I'm your host, Bryan, the Hype Ballard, back at it again, going into the King of the Ring, 1995. Let's get in. When we look at the tournament, this is actually the second event to be held on pay-per-view, with last year's 1994 event being won by Bret the Hitman Hart. But in 1995, it was actually the 8th edition of the King of the Ring tournament. Basically, the tournament was known but never on televised until the mid-90s. I go into that in a little bit in the first King of the Ring review video. But in this one, we were told that the first round matches have a 15-minute time limit this year, and the semifinals have a 30-minute, and the finals would get 1 hour to determine the king. We wouldn't need all that time in this one, but our participants in the tournament qualified for matches televised during WWF programs in weeks prior to the event. The first qualifying match took place on May 7th, 1994, where IRS Irwin R. Shyster, the father of Bray Wyatt and Uncle Howdy, defeated Scott Steiner in a televised match on WWF Superstars. The next qualifying match took place on May 9th, 1994, an episode of Monday Night Raw when Razor Ramon defeated Quang with the Razor's Edge in a qualifying match to enter the tournament. Ironically, Quang would later show up to be Savio Vega in WWF World. In a televised match May 14th, Mabel of Men on a Mission would defeat Pierre of the Quebecers to qualify for the tournament. And 2 days later, on May 16th, Monday Night Raw would get Bam Bam Bigelow and Thurman Sparky Plug, also known as Hardcore Holly, in which he got the victory and was entered into the tournament. The remaining qualifying matches built up and then played out on pay-per-view. Lex Luger faced Jeff Jarrett in a qualifying match on May 21st, 1994. During the match, Crush came to the ring and fought with Luger. Jarrett won the match by countout and advanced to the tournament. Owen Hart was scheduled to wrestle Earthquake on May 23rd in 94, but for the spot in the tournament, the plan was that Earthquake left the WWF. We're going ahead, we're going to get into all of what happened in this tournament and how we got to where we are, and what some criticize as maybe one of the worst King of the Ring tournaments in history. We'll find that out though. First matchup, we get Yokozuna versus Savio Vega, the newly debuted at In Your House, Savio Vega, with Razor Ramon in his corner. Savio Vega again was the face, while Yokozuna was the heel in this one. Razor was out of action due to a rib injury. Yokozuna with a shoulder tackle, leading to Vince, and ultimately Vince on the commentary on this one. Yokozuna missed an elbow drop, and Vega moved out of the way, with Vega and armbar leading the mighty Yokozuna. Vega went for a spin kick, but Yoko ducked it and Vega hit the mat. Yoko worked out over Vega in the corner, and Yoko wanted a bonsai drop, and Vega moved out of the way to avoid it just in time. Ultimately, Yoko moved out of the way, tossed Vega over the top rope. Vega with punches and chops, and Yoko came out with an uppercut to the throat. Yoko with a body slam, and he bounced off of the ropes with it, missing a leg drop when Vega moved. USA chants began. And Cornette on the outside, Jim Cornette managing, was angry and mad. Ultimately how that worked out. It's great trick to get the crowd into it. Vega with several clotheslines. Yoko was staggered, and Vega hit a spin kick. Vega punched Cornette off of the apron, a very funny landing spot. And Owen Hart showed up with punches to the ribs of Razor. And Vega left the ring, so Yoko left the ring too. Vega and Yoko battled on the floor, with Vega sending Yoko into the ring post. Vega went back into the ring, and it was a count out at 8 minutes and 24 seconds. Winner by countout, Savio Vega, winning against the mighty WWF former champion, Yokozuna. This was a tough one to watch. Kind of a little all over the place matchup. The fans were not into it for most part of it. However, Jim Cornette did his job as a manager to try to get some heel heat back on Yoko for this one. We got a nice just end to the match, and we moved ahead in the tournament to our next matchup. And the next matchup would be Sparky Thurman Plug, or Bob Spark Plug Harlot, as whatever you want to call him, versus the Roadie, also known as the Road Dogg. Pre-match, the Roadie later again was the heel, and Holly was the face, and Holly had just a classic 90s racing type gimmick. This was back when WWF had, every wrestler had a job, and the idea is that they wrestled while doing these jobs. Bob Holly defeated Mantar in a qualifying match for this one. Holly with a belly-to-belly suplex with a shoulder tackle for a 1 and a 2. Holly got a couple more quick near falls until the Roadie bailed and then hit on the floor just to regroup a little bit. Roadie hit hard with a whip to the corner 2 times. Roadie with an elbow drops and a chin lock. Holly fought back. And the Roadie and Holly going back and forth in this one. But ultimately we did get the Roadie continuing and winning in this one. Average matchup. Holly wrestling an exciting style while the Roadie was, kind of going through the motions in this one. But the finish was a little quick, as we did get Holly that looked like he may have kicked out as the referee counted the pin, making it a little bit more hard to justify the winner. However, we did get a winner to move on, and now we're going to get some other talent in the King of the Ring, and it was the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels. Michaels ultimately was the face at the time, the Royal Rumble winning in 1995, and Kama, his opponent, the Supreme Fighting Machine Kama, was the heel just a few years after his Papa Shango gimmick. But years before, the Godfather would arrive with the Ho Train. This is where I want to point out that there was a 15-minute time limit for the quarterfinal matches. Michaels avoided a slam and got into some punches. Michaels avoided a charging Kama, leading to more jab punches. Michaels ran to the ropes. Kama sent him to the apron, and Michaels skinned the cap, barely getting back in. And it was like he did at the King in the Royal Rumble moments. Kama back in with the kick to the ribs, followed by a clothesline. Really, the Supreme Fighting Machine showing what he's got and why he was called that. This was back when MMA was emerging and the WWF wanted to cash in on it with the likes of wrestlers and street fighting styles. Ultimately, Michaels hits a springboard forearm, and Kama took a bump to the mat. Both guys were out of the ring until Kama went for an elbow drop. Michaels moved, and Kama's elbow drop, he hit the ring. And there's a clock letting us know that we were just over 2 minutes left. Michaels with punches, and then he bounced off the rope, hit a leapfrog clothesline. And then it was announced that 2 minutes were left in the match, and Michaels punched Kama repeatedly. Michaels went up top, and he hit a double axe handle for a 1 and a 2. There was a 1 minute remaining in the matchup where the clock is ticking away. Michaels punched Kama 10 times into the turnbuckle. Michaels with a crossbody block. Kama rolling for a 1 and a 2. Ultimately, Michaels in the inside cradle. 2 count, 15 seconds left. Tick tock, it's the clock. Michaels went for a sunset flip on the pinfall, and the referee waved it off because time had expired. Before there was exactly a 3 count. And that was 15 minutes. We got a time limit draw. A very good matchup between the two, but the ending again kind of ended in a controversial time limit draw, which basically means no one really remembers this matchup. And it was a really good matchup that Shawn Michaels had in his career with the Supreme Fighting Machine. Considering ultimately the ending in the overall tournament, Michaels was very upset about the ending of this matchup. And Kama tried to attack him once again, and Michaels fought back with sweet chin music and a super kick. And a basically bump right out of the ring. Shawn's music played as we finished up the draw of this matchup. We then continue. We got The Undertaker in one of the Big 5 pay-per-views. Mabel made his way to the ring. And then when it was basically Men on the Mission was kind of breaking up as a tag team, and Mabel was getting his push on his own. Mabel was interviewed on his way to the ring, and The Undertaker got a huge ovation from the crowd as usual, and he led to the ring by Paul Bear. The King of the Ring matchup, Mabel versus The Undertaker with Paul Bear. Mabel, again, was the heel, weighed in about 568 pounds at the time, while The Undertaker was the face in the matchup. Taker opened up with punches, then a corner whip, and ultimately, we get Taker running clothesline to stagger Mabel, and then another clothesline knocked Mabel down. Taker walks the ropes, leading to a clothesline to the upper back. Mabel tripped up The Undertaker with a tackle-like move. It didn't look overly the best, but Mabel clothesline sent Taker over the top to the floor. Taker with a neck breaker on the top rope. Mabel hit a double chop and a throat leading. We got to ask, how is Mabel going to beat The Undertaker in this one? Mabel sat on the Taker's back, and it made him look a very weak-looking chin lock as the fans chanted "Rest in peace" for Taker, and Bear screaming outside, doing Paul Bear-like stuff. Ultimately, Taker left the ring, so Mabel sent him back into the steps, and Mo got a cheap shot in for good measure. Ultimately, the two are back and forth going at it, but Taker, back in the ring, runs the ropes, leading to a leaping clothesline. Taker hits the choke slam on the big man Mabel, and it was not easy to do for him due to the size of 568 pounds. But it looked decent enough. Taker punched Mo off the apron. Taker tried to pin, but no referee was in sight due to a bump. Kama ran down the Supreme Fighting Machine to the ring and kicked Taker in the back, and Mabel with a leg drop. Mo woke up the referee, and Mabel got the pinfall. 10 minutes and 44 seconds. Mabel advances, beating The Undertaker at the King of the Ring. Really, really, really crazy match here, and shocking that The Undertaker put over Mabel, and soon to be maybe King Mabel. But ultimately, we do get a couple slow spots in the matchup. You could tell Undertaker was trying his best with the big man. Undertaker usually works really well with big men in his career, but ultimately, it just wasn't enough to really, solidify this matchup, and it's one that we're kind of glad that we moved on from. Ultimately, there's a video showing the Hall of Fame inductees. We get Ernie Ladd, Pedro Morales, Grand Wizard, Antonio Roca, Fabulous Moolah, George Animal Steel, and Ivan Putski all in their latest class. This was prior to the Hall of Fame being associated with WrestleMania weekend. And next we get a King of the Ring matchup for semifinals. We get Savio Vega making his entrance with Razor joining him, and the Roadie and Jeff Jarrett were interviewed backstage by Todd Pettengill. Pettengill playing the dorky persona that he loves to do. Ultimately, we get this next matchup, Vega versus the Roadie. Vega was the face and Roadie was the heel. Vega with a hip toss followed by a clothesline, and it sent Roadie to the floor with a really just over-the-top bump. Roadie worked over Vegas with 2 punches and a headbutt off the middle rope for a 1 and a 2. Ultimately, we get a long middle rope, so he missed a diving attack. Vega hits an elbow to the chest with a body slam. Vega whipped to the rope, leading with a boot to the face. Jarrett grabbed Vega's foot. This was a time when WWE really wanted to make Roadie look a little bit strong, along with Jeff Jarrett, and not just his manager. There was a story brewing there that would be seen in Your House too. But we get a roll-up pinfall by Savio Vega, getting the win on the Roadie at the 6-minute mark in this matchup. Ultimately, they worked hard. I'll give them that. The Roadie's offense was usually the stuff that you see at this point, but ultimately, Vega did a good job selling most of the matches. And then ultimately, a roll-up pin for the 1 and 2 and the 3. Ultimately, then, we do get to the next matchup. We're going to the Kiss My Foot match. This matchup was a long-term feud with Bret the Hitman Hart and Jerry the King Lawler. Bret Hart and Jerry Lawler ultimately would have their moments over the years, ultimately attacking Bret Hart at the very first King of the Ring on pay-per-view at the inauguration of the Hitman. But in this case, we now get a matchup many years later, a matchup that would lead us beyond the In Your House, beyond the Kiss My Foot, and actually many months later spurred the idea of Isaac Yankem, DDS, aka Kane, playing that character as Jerry Lawler's dentist due to the damage done in his mouth in this matchup. We basically get back in the ring. Lawler hits a pile driver at one point in the matchup. Very famous move for Lawler. And ultimately, Lawler trained in this matchup. He gets the chance of Burger King, but Lawler's training was really kind of showing him walking around in stables barefoot, standing in horse manure, making his feet as disgusting as possible for the Hitman for a nice comedy relief and a hook to make us into the matchup. We get Burger King chance, Bret with punches, Lawler with an eye gouge, and Lawler tossed out of the ring. Lawler took off his right boot, and he had a dirty sock on it. And Lawler hit Bret with his boot in the face while the announcers sold that Lawler's foot smelled so bad the announcers could smell it from just outside the ring. Lawler got a 1 and a 2 with the boot to the face. Lawler pushed his nasty foot right to Lawler's face, but Bret blocked him, and then he went for a headbutt. And ultimately, Hart delivered some blows to the head, but Lawler jabbed the boot right back in his face. Ultimately, Bret gets the rebound, and he hits a patented moves, beginning with the side Russian leg sweep. And Bret follows with a backbreaker, followed by a diving elbow smash from the middle rope, a la Bret Hart signature style. And the crowd was on fire for Bret as he locked in the sharpshooter in the middle of the ring. Lawler quitting and giving Bret Hart the win at the 9-minute 20-second mark, because Lawler did beat him at In Your House, the pay-per-view, right before this. So Bret got his return match in a bigger situation. Ultimately, submission by Bret did get the win here. Fun matchup back and forth. Bret delivered a headbutt to Lawler, and then it was not over. Not only did Bret make Lawler kiss his foot, but he took Lawler's own disgusting foot and jammed it right down into Lawler's mouth for a very entertaining affair. I remember seeing this one live on pay-per-view when I was younger, and I do remember seeing it and saying and just thinking about how gross that is and where it would go from there. Jerry Lawler did a great job as usual selling the aspects of the disgusting foot, and then ultimately how disgusting it was. It was a way to humiliate Lawler. In addition, like I mentioned, at SummerSlam that year, Lawler's mouth would have been so messed up from this matchup that he went to his dentist. And his dentist was so angry with the work that he caused him that he would go after Bret Hart in a feud of the summer of '95 as Isaac Yankem, DDS. And he would go on to be WWE Hall of Famer Kane as the dentist. Guys, if you like wrestling, hit that like button. If you like WWE King of the Ring and like to see it more as a single pay-per-view, tell me about that down below. Let's move on. And we move on, we shall. We get the main event of the King of the Ring tournament. We got Mabel versus Savio Vega, with Mo and Razor respecting their friends and helping out. Pre-match, we do get Mabel, who was the heel. We get Vega was the face. And this was Mabel's second match on the show due to a countout. But Vega was wrestling his fourth match since he was on the kickoff show prior to this. Vega was aggressive right away with punches, and Mabel was right up against him. Mabel missed the clothesline, but Savio moved. Mabel then with a body slam, but Vega avoided an elbow smash, and Vega hit a clothesline that sent Mabel over the top. Mabel pulled out Vega. Vega sent Mabel into the ring ropes. Ultimately, we get a lot of back and forth in this one. Vega was against the turnbuckle. Fans were a little bored here, and they started chanting ECW out of boredom. Mabel missed a corner splash, and Vega moved, so Vega got a roll-up for a 1 and a 2. Vega with a running spin kick for a 1 and a 2. But Vega ran the ropes. Mabel caught him in the arms, hits a falling power slam, ultimately hitting and getting the 1, the 2, and the 3 at the 8-minute 32-second mark. Winner and new King of the Ring, the man on the mission, King Mabel himself. Fans will go on down in history talking about how this was one of the worst King of the Ring tournaments. in the history of the WWF. And I would say it is kind of hard to argue the logic. I look and I say there was so much more opportunity, even with the preliminary matches. We could have got a Adam Bomb in place of Mabel, or we could have got somebody else to use the King of the Ring to push talent. This was kind of one of the first ideas the WWE had to use the moniker, and the idea that it would continue through the next few years. Razor Ramon comes in after post-match. They get the fight, and then eventually we get into the coronation ceremony of King Mabel as the fans boo. And then ultimately, long live King Mabel, as Mo says, and they move on to one of the crazy summers of the King. We then get into the main event. It's the tag team match. Diesel and Bam Bam Bigelow teaming up against Sid and Tatanka. Bam Bam Bigelow made his entrance. Not a huge pop, but Diesel got a much bigger ovation as WWF champion, and he was definitely the babyface of the generation. And Diesel had a significant black brace on his right elbow. Vince was on mic selling the spectrum of the crowd, and ultimately we get this tag matchup. I was always confused of why this was the tag matchup. And it felt like In Your House 1, we got Sid and Diesel. And then we led to a follow-up matchup at In Your House 2 with Sid and Diesel, but we needed a match in between. So we said, throw a tag team match in there at King of the Ring to see if we can get Bam Bam Bigelow a little bit of rub from Diesel. But ultimately, we do get a matchup between these guys. Sid hits Diesel's elbow, noting that he's a little injured, and then drove the elbow into the turnbuckle while the referee wasn't looking. Tatanka delivered chomps, the right elbow, and a boot to the face. Sid tagged in and pulled to the right arm with the elbows. And Sid and Diesel looking, and the crowd was teasing about how they could go at it once again. That was the build-up for the follow matchup here. But great bump by Bigelow at some point in the matchup. Tatanka back in and kicks the back of Bigelow, followed by a belly-to-back suplex. Tatanka continued with his normal Tatanka-style offense. Sid was back with a running kick to the body, and then Bigelow with more. And Bigelow tried to fight back, but Sid hit him with a boot to the face. Bigelow went in, and he fought valiantly. Ultimately, Bigelow did some no-selling at one point, just like Tatanka would do as the face, but both men ran the ropes, leading to Bigelow and Tatanka hitting a double clothesline right in the middle of the ring. This leads to an attack and to a tag in, and ultimately we get Diesel hits the jackknife powerbomb on Tatanka on the tag, but then he didn't get it perfectly, and Diesel covered Tatanka for a 1 and a 2, and Diesel pulled him back up, just kind of showboating. Diesel pointed to Sid and said that he wanted him, so Sid walked away and was like, sorry pal, to DiBiase on the way back. Diesel with an elbow drop. Tatanka for a 1 and a 2 and a 3. An elbow drop. That's what got the win at this one. 17-minute match. Ultimately, we get a tag team match that dragged on for a little long, and our right team did win. That did send the fans home happy. But ultimately, we just get kind of a continuation into the next pay-per-view. And while I applaud WWE for always featuring their WWF champion in a main event, I do have my thoughts on that. And let's get into that in our final thoughts. And here they are. Ultimately, I look at the final thoughts of the King of the Ring. Here's some fun facts for you guys. The jesters holding the doors and opening the doors of the King of the Ring tournament entranceway was none other than a very young Matt and Jeff Hardy. Matt was 20 years old at the time. Jeff Hardy was 17 at the time. The following night on Raw, Jeff Hardy would lose to Waylon Mercy in a matchup. Jerry Lawler's puke was actually a mixture of graham crackers and soda. Very well placed, just to add a little effect to the King of the Ring. And the only King of the Ring with no championship matchup in its overall since it was brought to pay-per-view. So, I do ask, while I applaud the WWE for putting their champion in a main event, and they were very good about doing that, something I've had a problem with in other promotions not doing that, but I do ask why a tag match was deemed to be in the main event, when some people did question Diesel as a draw at the point in time. But ultimately, those are just some final thoughts and results. Let me know some of yours down below. Where did 1995 King Mabel and the King of the Ring really rank for you guys? And I'm going to go ahead and head out. Thank you, each and every one of you. Guys, I want to say thank you for all the new subscribers to the channel. And it's not goodbye. It's just game over.